Welcome, everybody, to Disruptive Conversations. It's Thursday, and I'm so thrilled to be here with you. One of the things that we're talking about today and is about trauma. And when we do so, we need to bring our curiosity along with us. Sometimes it is very helpful to take a stance of being curious, wondering about it, understanding what we can learn from it. And the person that we're meeting with has a different kind of an orientation to trauma as a trauma-informed writer. And that's something that we're going to be talking about. And here she is. Without any further ado, welcome, Lisa. And I'm going to be introducing the show, myself and you, and then we're off to our conversation. So it's Thursday at noon, so welcome to Disruptive Conversations with thought leaders, entrepreneurs, innovators, disruptors, authors, in which we deep dive into the experiences these women have needed to navigate and conquer in order to have achieved their personal and professional success up to this point in time. I'm Dr. Risa Reiger, clinical psychologist, and I'm an expert in change. I help people make positive change at any point, and the good news is that you're never too late. Positive change is available to you. But in order to create change, we need to disrupt. We need to disrupt a thought, a feeling, a belief, a behavior, a habit in order to create your 10.0 life. And that's what this series of conversations is all about. And today I am delighted to welcome Lisa Cooper Ellison, author, speaker, trauma-informed writing coach, and host of the Writing Your Resilience podcast. What a great title that is. And she works and writes at the intersection of creativity and healing and blends her personal experiences with suicide loss with her clinical training to empower writers to transform their pain into powerful, transformative stories. You can find her essays and stories on risk in the New York Times, HuffPost, Hippocampus Literary Magazine, a personal favorite of mine, and the Kenyon Review Online. And today, to help us understand, learn, and take with us what makes sense to us and also inform our view of what this is all about, I'm thrilled to have Lisa here with us. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so delighted to be here.
So as we're jumping right in, so Lisa, what is it that you needed to disrupt inside of yourself in order to have created your personal professional success and perhaps enlightenment up to this point in time?
Yeah, that is such a great question. It's one I think we all need to be thinking about. And before I begin, I just want to give a quick shout out to Estelle Erasmus, who connected me with you. Thank you so much, Estelle. And yeah, so the belief that I had to confront and disrupt in my own life was the belief that staying small and focusing on security would actually make me safe and lead to the life that I was hoping to have. So I'll tell you a little story. I grew up in a family that had a lot of intergenerational trauma. So things had been happening for years, people were very dysregulated, and that was passed on to me. And on top of just the family things that were happening, I grew up in a town that was going through a massive trauma. And in my case, I grew up in Elmira, New York, which was the epicenter of the economic meltdown that was happening in the 1980s. So things were so bad, we actually showed up in the New York Times. This is a pretty small town. And so all of these factories were leaving. In 1983, my grandfather, he lost his job and his retirement at the age of 61. My father ended up losing his job. A couple of years later, he was functionally homeless for a couple of years. Within a space of just a short period of time, one of the main employers was prison. So if you were able to get hired by the prison, that was a great thing. And of course, we could have a huge conversation around that. So, because of the things that had happened, I got the message in multiple ways that you needed to stay small, you need to be realistic, right? Which means thinking about security. I was told things like, we don't have money for you to go to college, which was just true. So you need to figure it out. And probably the best things for you to do would be to either join the military or take the civil service test so that you can get a secure government job. And which is, I mean, we could talk about that as well. We're not going to go there. But so these messages were ingrained in me. And even though I left home at 17, I ended up going to another town and having this certain kind of life for a period of time. I believe that if I just had a safe, secure job that felt reasonable, I was going to have the life that I wanted. And I ended up graduating from college with, a degree in writing. And that was always my love. Like from a small child, I knew that I wanted to write, but I didn't think I was very good at it. And also, I learned from all of these professors, it's not realistic, right? There are not a lot of jobs for professors or for people in this field. It's unstable. So I ended up becoming a special education teacher, which was a really powerful and important career that I had. And I loved the kids I work with. And then I worked as a therapist, and these are both great fields to work in. But here's the problem: it wasn't my soul's calling. And so I always felt like there was this mismatch. But I kept telling myself, no, you needed to have this like security, the safety, all of that. And so not long after I got my degree in counseling, I ended up getting Lyme disease. And
Mm.
and that in and of itself is a big deal. But in addition to all of the trauma that my family had, there was a lot of chronic illness. So my great grandmother ended up dying early. She was in her bed for most of her adult life. My grandmother ended up being a recluse for the last 40 years of her life. She was on the couch. My mom ended up leaving the workforce in her 30s for that same reason. And at 38, when I got Lyme disease, I was terrified because I didn't know what was going to happen. And I tried to force safety and security by I kept working. I didn't want to leave the workforce. I kept trying to force solutions. And then within 2 years, I ended up so sick, I had no choice. My body was shutting down. I was going to die. And I ended up sitting on this couch, and I will never forget this. I was in Portland, Oregon. My husband had this job interview, and I'm sitting there looking in the mirror at myself. I have these dark circles. My face is I'm jaundiced, so I have kind of a yellow tinge to my face. I had lost all of this weight, and I looked at myself, and I'm like, I'm dying. I am dying. And I really believed that I was at that time. And I thought, I have no idea how much time I have left. But writing has called to me this whole time. It has been part of my soul's purpose. I think I'm going to pursue this because what do I have to lose at this point? I don't know how much time I have left.
That's huge. I'm so, hearing all of this, that, we think that we're on a safe path,
Yeah.
and so we have the disruption. And so there are two kinds of disruption. There's the disruption that we choose internally, and it's up to us to make the internal change. And then there's also the disruption that happens
Yeah.
externally. We need to have and try to have and figure out the wherewithal to be able to meet in the moment. And it sounds like your family and you at all these different stages in your life just got slammed.
Yes. There was a lot of slamming again and again and again. And one of the things that I really had to confront when all of this happened was fear, right? Fear is often at the heart of it. And most of my adult life up to that point, I believed that what I needed to do was push the fear away, ignore the fear, get away from the fear, do anything I could to get away from it. And what I learned in that moment, and what I've learned since, as I've really redefined and reimagined my life, is that I needed to befriend the fear. I needed to bring it in, love it, and say, we can live together.
At least find a space for it.
Yes, yes.
For for lots of people, like bringing in fear, it feels completely counterintuitive.
Yeah.
And when we're when particularly we have either avoid fear or
Hmm.
about bringing fear in is being really taking big risks and being the person who's, I don't know, climbing a mountain without any ropes, that. And so what does taking risk look like, and what does
Hmm.
embracing some aspect of fear look like when you're neither avoiding it nor being somewhat, cavalier about it?
Yeah, and I think I have an interesting relationship with fear because I've experienced a lot of it in my life, but I also used to be a skydiver. And I've actually done, I used to
Here
be a
we
skydiver, and I actually have done rock climbing without ropes, which sometimes been dangerous things. So this idea of, doing these really dangerous things was comfortable to me. But the idea of feeling afraid and going after my dreams, that was the stuff that was really uncomfortable. And I think what I had to do was recognize that in order to take calculated risks with your life in terms of the things that are most important to you, like really thinking about what your sole purpose is that I had to say that it's okay if the fear is still there, that we can walk together. And that meant a lot of deep breathing. It meant a lot of mindfulness, a lot of meditation, a lot of just even journaling. Like, what are you trying to teach me, fear? What are you trying to help me understand and uncover in my own life, in addition to also a lot of therapy?
and and fear, fear is about the narrative that we bring to it.
Yeah.
Fear is just one entity, and what we say about it, the stories we tell ourselves about it,
Yes.
what it means to us, how we translate it, is the space that we can start to get some control over and really
Hmm.
own stamp onto. Do you think?
Absolutely. And I think some of the ways that I have shifted and disrupted the story around fear is like, originally it was like, oh, fear is bad. This experience inside my body is bad. And it was
Yeah.
uncomfortable, and that's the case. But just to say, like, sometimes what we call fear is excitement, right? That this is just energy. And so how do we allow this energy to move through us? And so that we can continue to do all of the things that we want to do in our lives.
One of the things that you wrote about in your bio is is confronting the aftermath of suicide.
Yes.
And I think that's really important. We see so much of that happening, whether it gets a lot of playtime or not in news and media. But for every single person, oftentimes there's some way that every single one of us is affected by a suicide,
Yeah.
whether it's family or in our community, or if you have kids, like someone in your kid's school, and
Mm-hmm.
that ripple effect. So could you speak more on that, please?
Yeah. Yeah. So, when I was 22 years old, my 20-year-old brother, Joe, died by suicide in the middle of a mental health crisis. And it's interesting because he's one of a few different people that I have of suicide, a few different suicides I've experienced in my own life, but that was absolutely devastating. And suicide is so complex because someone has made a choice, right? They have chosen to die by their own hand. It's not that simple, right? There are often many different factors that go into the reasons why people die by suicide. But as a person who is living with that, I felt like it was my fault. I felt like wanted to fix it. I mean, I didn't know what to do with this immense grief and pain that I was experiencing. And I think because I was so young and I had not yet gone through things in my life that showed me you can live with hard things and be okay. Like that it's not that the hard thing doesn't hurt, but that you can learn how to have a bigger container. Like you can be bigger than this grief, or you can work through these things. So it was absolutely devastating. And looking back, it also cracked me open. But I think one of the things that we have to think about when it comes to suicide is that, yes, there are at least 5 people that are affected by every single suicide that happens. And that if you are close to the person who died by suicide, and especially if this happens in your family, you are also at risk for suicide. And there was a period of time when I experienced my own suicidal thoughts, where I wasn't sure that I wanted to live because I didn't think that I could live with the pain that I had experienced. And that is a common thing that happens to people.
That is so true and real, because there's no reason for us to know that we could, because it's not
Right.
in our realm of experience. And it's so profoundly, there really aren't words to put on it. And you know, you're a writer, I write, and so words are our space of
Yeah.
communication. But there are times when there just aren't the words to fully really embrace it and communicate, but we don't know. And there's no reason why we should know that is
Yeah.
thing that we, you know, that we know how to deal with, or that we should
Right.
deal with.
Absolutely. And I think the two things that I had to learn were, number one, I didn't have a crystal ball, right? Of course, if I had known that this was going to happen, I would have done everything I could have to stop it. And I don't have a crystal ball. No, none of us do. But then the other thing is that one of the biggest questions that most survivors of suicide loss live with is the why, right? Why did this happen? Why couldn't I stop it? All of these different whys. And I think part of healing is recognizing that some of these whys are unanswerable, and that it's okay for you to live with the desire to have that why answered, and to accept the fact that it never will be.
One of the whys that oftentimes is very hard for people, especially for when it's someone that you love and care about deeply, is also like, even though this isn't said a lot, is like, why wouldn't my love or me be enough for
Yes.
that person to, you know, not succumb to? Sometimes it's impulsive, sometimes it
Yeah.
is well thought out and planned, but I'm here and I love
Hmm.
about this person. Why couldn't I be enough to have them hang in?
Oh my gosh, yes. That sense of abandonment is so profound. And I think on top of the feelings of responsibility, that abandonment can really hit at your self-esteem, at your self-concept, because it's like, if I were worthy, right? If I were worthy, if I was good enough, you would have stuck around, and you didn't. So yeah, it's so complex because of all of these different aspects of the grief that you have to navigate, in addition to whatever the story is around how someone died.
I'm thinking about you're a trauma informed writing coach. And I'm thinking about how when you start to do your own writing, not necessarily a
Hmm.
science, your own writing, like in that moment, and it's just, and you can share it, you cannot share it. It's
Hmm.
really your make, even if you have an assignment, you can not share that particular thing. But that at that moment, you're in such a space of intimacy with yourself,
Yeah.
and that level of intimacy, and how far, how deep, what you're willing at that moment in time to really be able and allow yourself to see, think about, and actually put down on paper, so it's there in front of you concretely, rather than
Hmm.
just that stays in your head. There's a different experience of that. Do you think so, Lisa?
Oh, absolutely. and that's one of the things that I love about the work that I do. And I think part of my job as a trauma informed writing coach is to teach people how to regulate themselves as they do this work, because a lot of times when you're writing, especially if you're writing in story, so you're writing in scene where, it's like a movie for the person that's reading it. When you're writing in that way, you're reliving that experience at some level. But once it's on paper, there's so much agency there for you, because not only is it not living inside you anymore, but you get to change it, right? You get to revise it. You get to understand it in a completely different way. And, after my brother died, there was a period of 3 years where I couldn't really write anything. And I certainly couldn't write about that experience. But I think giving yourself permission to be able to write about your experiences can be so healing, because you can begin to see, oh, these are the patterns, this is what really happened, and this is the story I'm telling myself about what happened, because that's the piece that you have the most control over, right? You can't control the events are the events, but what story do you bring to that event, and can you make it bigger?
And make it bigger and not just arbitrarily. And I think this
Yeah.
is so important. I want our communities to hear this. It's not about finding silver linings.
No, it's not.
And that's so important, that when you're in pain, when you're in grief, it's like you don't have to, and you
Mm-hmm.
don't ever to
Yeah.
have. And the side of this is that we can embrace it for what it is, get clarity about that,
Mm-hmm.
make how we want to deal with it, bring it forth. There are people who create nonprofits, or they start to support different kinds of charities or foundations, but that we don't have to get to silver lining or put something on our experience that really doesn't feel authentic, or but it
Yes.
feels more like, well, I should.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm one of my pet peeves is what I call bright siding. Like, oh, let's look at the bright side. Let's like fix it. And I mean, I think anytime that you can find the lightness within darkness, or you can
Mhm.
embrace both sides, I think it's important. But forcing yourself to do that, or forcing yourself to create a story that's different or than what you're actually feeling, is not helpful to you. And sometimes just acknowledging, like, this is the way it is right now, and it hurts and it's hard, that alone can be healing, because it creates ease in the fact that it doesn't feel good.
It's really counterintuitive. I
Right.
mean, as a clinician, I watch to see, where it goes and whether people can start lifting, coming and experiencing differently. But it's a counterintuitive piece that one
Mm-hmm.
of the heal is to experience your sadness.
Yes.
And, people say, well, it's been 2 weeks, it's been a month for some sort of loss or grieving to happen, like when, like your timeline is going. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a counterintuitive thing. I mean, obviously, we don't want to be in a profound grief. We go through stages. We can have it come up again. It can be decades afterwards, and we can have twinges and moments. And it's so important. And I love what you're talking about, that to acknowledge it, to call it as it is, and to not like, kind of like shine it up.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I actually was at the Psychotherapy Networkers Conference a couple of weeks ago, and I sat in a session with David Kessler, whom I love. And he was talking about something that I've thought and felt for years, which is the first 2 years are acute grief. And I've interviewed people who have written stories about grief. Amy Lynn is one of them, and she was writing about something that happened to her. It was like 2 or 3 years ago, and I said, that is grief in its infancy or toddler stage. And I think when we can acknowledge that, because our society is terrible when it comes to grief. It's terrible. It doesn't know what to do with it. But realizing that, even the first 5 years, that's young grief. And depending on what the experience was, you can go through those cycles of grief. And it's not stages, it's more of the cycles of grief again and again. And it can hurt a lot. And even though, my brother Joe has been gone for, it's been almost 30 years. And I still love him and think about him all the time. And, my container for the grief is really big right now because I've done a lot of work around it and I have spent many, many years boo-hooing about it. But, something can happen, a little trigger of a song or an anniversary or just this, I'll see something and it can take you back to the pain of that first day. And what I've learned is it's okay to just be in that pain.
And it's not, I think that the boo-hooing, that this is precious.
It
And
is
and
precious.
we don't have to lighten it, and we don't have to
Exactly.
be devaluing of our own pain at the
Mm-hmm.
moment. And certainly, as we move on, there are all sorts of moments, and they're not necessarily sad moments. They're moments of this wonderful thing is happening. And I sure wish, you know,
Yes.
as, your brother, my parents, or my aunt, my dear friend were here for this. They would have loved this so.
Mm-hmm. I had an exact moment of that. What was it? So the anniversary of my brother's death is February the 8th, and I happened to be in San Francisco. And he was a person who always wanted to travel to all of these different places. And so I'm looking out on the bay, and I have this little tear in my eyes, and I imagined him with me. And I'm even tearing up now as I say this because I just wanted him to see it through my eyes, and I wanted to imagine, and I imagined that he was there with me, that we were doing this
Mhm.
together. And I think that's the thing about the grief. And when I say boohooing, it's like you can see it in my eyes right now. There's a little bit of that's red because I'm connecting with that grief. And I think it's important, the times when you are kneeling on the floor sobbing, they are important. That is sacred work, and acknowledge it and appreciate it for what it is. And so I think, yeah, we want to honor that and allow it to be there because grief is love. Grief is love. And I wrote something about this a little while ago that's going to be in this book on sibling loss, which I'm very excited about. It's an anthology on sibling loss. And what I essentially said is that these tears are precious to me now because every time I cry, it is a reminder that my brother was alive, right? He's been dead for so long. He's a memory. He's more memory than he is actual person because so much time has passed. And when I can cry, it's like, yeah, the love is real. He's real. Our relationship is real. And I think it's important to hold space for that.
Hold space for that. And when we hold space, we're giving honor to it. When we hold
Yes.
space for something, we're saying, some people say, like, what is holding space? And holding space,
Mm-hmm.
that there's something in you that can think, gee, I wonder how so and so is doing. I remember that time when I was with you, not to put words in your mouth, you have plenty of words yourself. I don't need to contribute there. But to remember, oh, my brother and I, we had that, yeah, I'm having this great ice cream. And I remember that time with my brother.
Yes.
We were having ice cream together and laughing, and the cone fell on the ground,
Mm-hmm.
and what all of these things are. And holding space is so crucial. It keeps that connectedness in different ways. It morphs, and it gives us real hope and real true optimism.
Yes. It does because it shows that the love is enduring and that, you know, that life is so much more and that we can keep these people alive. It's not that someone dies and then it's over. It's, life goes on and they come with you. And that is so important. And so yeah, letting that happen and allowing for whatever the feelings are, whether it's the joy or the sadness or whatever, just letting it be there is so important.
Our feelings come in all shapes and sizes, and that's so important that we know, and that we don't have to throw them out. Excuse me, a little bit of allergy season here happening. So so we come to the end of our time together. There's so much more to talk about, Lisa. So please share, what's your next disruption?
My next disruption is really thinking about how traumatic events can also serve as awakening. And I think that has been certainly the case in my life. And I think when we are writing about them, we are awakening to our power. We are awakening our voice. We are awakening all of these things inside us. And how can we capitalize that as we tell whatever the story is? And I'm really excited about exploring this more with all kinds of people in a variety of different ways, because I'm now learning to be an Akashic Records reader, which I'm very excited about, and adding that to the many modalities that I have in terms of how I work with people.
Lisa, thank you so very much for sharing your journey, sharing your heart, your wisdom, your experience with us today. Let's take a moment and do our cover shot. I don't think I'm ever going to be on the cover, but we can be on the cover of this Instagram.
Exactly.
Okay, so here we go. And one more.
Okay.
Thank you so much for taking that journey with us today. And everyone who's listening, this is one that if you've missed any part of it, you can find it on my Instagram live, on my Instagram, on Lisa's Instagram. Let people know that you need to hear this, and there's someone who needs to hear this today that you know. Please let them know that. If you are not yet following me, please do so. I drop videos and all sorts of information that's helpful, and Lisa does as well. And I'll see you back next week for Disruptive Conversations. Can't wait to see you then, and always remember that I've saved a seat for you. See
Thank
you.
you so much.
Okay, thank you.